One thing I tell people who are interested in meat safety is a lot of the meat that we eat here in the U.S. is absolutely banned in many, many countries in the world. And ractopamine is one example, like China won't take it. I think Japan, certainly Korea. Our beef with ractopamine is not allowed as an import to other countries. And of course, the main example of that is our hormone-saturated beef is banned in the whole European Union. If people realize that, they might ask, well, why are we eating something that 30 countries won't touch? And the European Union literally says in their documentation, we do not want this beef because the hormones in it are highly correlated with breast and prostate cancer. And I'm always shocked at how little coverage there is of the fact that our meat is banned elsewhere.
The Vidal Speaks podcast.
Episode 94, Martha Rosenberg, the truth about what is in our meat and how big pharma and big ag is killing us. Welcome to Vidal Speaks. My name is Deborah Vidal, former 11-year LPGA golf pro turned classical homeopath, certified plant-based nutritionist, and wellness coach. Each week here on Vidal Speaks, we bring you knowledge, inspiration, or natural remedies to help you take charge of your health and feel your best. I believe health is freedom and knowledge is power, so tuning in each week will give you the power to take steps towards freeing yourself from the chains that hold you back from having the energy to do all you want in life. No matter where you are in your journey of wellness, Vidal Speaks can help. I promise. Hi everyone, welcome back. What a month it's been. Actually, the last couple months seemed to me like so many people got hit by bad news about their health or a disaster like the ongoing one in Puerto Rico from the hurricane. And then there's the Houston and Florida hurricanes. Man, I'm still sending my family in Puerto Rico and all the other people there a big hug. And we're hoping that the U.S. can step it up and help you guys. I just want you to know you're in my thoughts. And if this was not enough, then we had the shooting in Las Vegas. I don't know about you guys, but I'm ready for some smooth sailing now. I need some peace. Thankfully, the holidays are around the corner, and I think they couldn't come at a better time. I love the holidays so much. It's my absolutely most favorite time of the year. I love fall, but sadly, we haven't had a fall yet. Our days are still in the high 90s. It's supposed to be 99 and 101 3 days this week. Crazy. I feel like we've had more days in the 90s and hundreds than we had in August and September. So it doesn't feel like fall, but I'm gearing up for those holidays anyway, and I'm sending vibes for the fall weather to arrive. And after the most deadly season of fires in the U.S., especially on the West Coast here, we're ready for rain, aren't you guys? And I'm ready for the cold. If I have to root for winter now, I will. I think no one on the West Coast is sad to see summer go right now. So hello, fall, and hello, holidays. I love the holidays, you guys. And in a few days, the time will change. And boy, my body's going to be happy about that. I'm one of those early rising people that wake up at 5 a.m. And I have to tell you, those 2 hours of darkness until the sun rises just feels totally wrong. And my body feels so out of sync with the natural Krebs cycle of life and nature. I would vote to eliminate daylight savings time. Anyways, I have to tell you that in addition to all these events that touched my family personally the last month, I had 5 straight weeks of computer issues. Honestly, I'm sick of computer stuff, I admit, and anyone who knows me will tell you guys that I have the worst computer karma they've ever seen. It's true, but hey, better to have bad computer karma than bad health karma. So my computer got so bad that it wasn't even able to be fixed by the Apple Genius Bar. They had to send it to the factory to be repaired. It's a long story, But everything went wrong, and I was without a computer for 3 weeks. And in the middle of that, my iPad broke. So honestly, I put up 3 shows the last 3 weeks, doing it on my iPad and other software, borrowing stuff, buying apps. It was a nightmare. What a challenge. But I'm back, and all is good now, and the holidays are around the corner, so I feel ready to move on and into the happy time of the year. Thanksgiving's coming soon, and I'm so thankful already that it's approaching. I have so much to be thankful for, as I'm sure many of you feel too. I look forward to cooking my vegan feast this Thanksgiving and celebrating a meat-free, delicious meal with my friends. Oh, speaking of meat, not meat-free, but meat, well, I'm super excited to tell you about my guest today. Her name is Martha Rosenberg, and she's an investigative reporter who writes all about the lies that Big Pharma feeds us. Funny, because literally it's what they are feeding us that's killing us. And also, she's going to tell us the truth about what is in our meat, and often the two overlap because so many of our drugs go into our livestock. Martha's an amazing reporter. She digs up all the facts and truths that are hidden from us, and then she writes about them. I love her articles and her work, and she's agreed to come back and speak to us more on other subjects that she writes on. But today we're going to focus more on how we're not being told what is really in our meat and uncovering a lot of hidden truths. Did you know that 70 to 80% of all antibiotics used in the U.S. alone are only being used for our livestock or factory farmed animals? What? That's shocking. Now, for those of you out there that are saying, phew, I'm so glad I'm vegan or plant-based. Well, it's not that simple, because Martha tells us how these drugs are found in the urine and waste of our animals, and then that goes in our soils, and now it's being found in our lettuces and our veggies. Geez, it's so frustrating because you can try so hard to avoid something, and no matter what you do, you end up getting exposure, and the very agencies that are supposed to protect us, they allow it to happen. I feel sometimes like I'm going down with the masses, although I'm not contributing to or supporting any of these practices, and that's frustrating. But the message is loud and clear that we need to learn as much as we can where our food is coming from and how it's grown. We need to understand that the FDA and the USDA are not in business to protect us, guys, and they are not there to tell us what is healthy. They are there for profit. Cha-ching, cha-ching. It's not about our lives. It's about their profit, and you need to get that. It's sad but true. But if you know this, then you're going to learn more about how to take charge of your health and the food that you eat and don't eat. And remember, the biggest power we own is how we spend our dollar. If moms all got together and said, we will not allow our children to eat this horrible food in our schools, and they all sent their kid to school with organic lunches filled with healthy veggies and plant-based goodies, then that lunch program would have to change or it would die. Money talks. When you spend money, it's like voting. So vote on the things that you believe in and that you want to support. And when you don't like something, then don't contribute to it. And by the way, I have to say this, if you're a person that loves animals and you're eating meat, well, then you're supporting the violent killing of 88 land animals every year. So put your food in alignment with your beliefs and know that how you spend your dollar should also be in alignment with your beliefs. The world has been in a total greed mode for so long now. Gimme, 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 as my mom used to say. Take, take, take. We are at a crisis point, folks, not a full turning around point, because we've lost species already that we can't get back, and there's destruction that's happened that's gone too far to reverse. However, we have much we can do to turn it around and to make it go the other way, but it's going to take all of us. You know, I always say power is in numbers, and we're a movement, you guys. I believe it's happening. More and more people are angry about what's happening these days. All right, I better get off this tangent, right? Get on with the show, Deborah. I'm sure you're saying that. Okay, are you guys ready to go talk to Martha Rosenberg? I sure am. But first, let me tell you a little bit about her because that's the routine, right? Martha Rosenberg is a nationally recognized investigative health reporter and author. Rosenberg's food and drug exposé, Born with a Junk Food Deficiency, was praised by the Times of London, Public Library of Science, and Vice Media, and named as part of the 2016 One Book, One Chicago program. Rosenberg has appeared on C-SPAN, National Public Radio, and lectured at medical school and university levels. Martha Rosenberg is also an editorial cartoonist. Her articles have been a frequent contributor to the San Francisco Chronicle, the Providence Journal, and the Chicago Tribune. She has also contributed to the Boston Globe, LA Times, Arizona Republic, the New Orleans Times, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and so many more publications. You can find the links to follow her work in the show notes. Okay, now let's go speak to Martha. I think this one, you may need a cup of chamomile tea in your hand while you listen to help calm your nerves. But I think you'll learn that her word is so research-based that she'll be one of those resources you can count on for truth. So try to relax and learn some of the shocking truths now. Okay, here we go. Hi, Martha. I'm super excited to speak to you today because we have a common agenda, and that's to get the truth out to the people on what's going on with our food and all the drug companies are doing to us. So I just absolutely love your work, and I'm so grateful for you joining me here today on the Vidal Speaks podcast. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And I also love your work. So thank you so much for including me.
Oh, I'm so happy about this. Really, this is one of my most exciting interviews that I've done because I just love the stuff you write on. I mean, it's not easy to step across that line and tell people the truth. And this is why I stopped my practice to do this show. So I really respect your work. And I just always like to begin because I want to know more like how people, I guess maybe that's my homeopath nature. I like to know the deeper story behind the story. So I really want you to start first by, why don't you tell everybody what is it you do? Because they may have not read your articles yet. So, and then we'll get into your story about how you got there.
Well, sure. So I am an investigative reporter or journalist, and I basically cover big food and big pharma. And there is a big overlap between the two, but I cover maybe things that either big food or big pharma don't particularly want the public to know, and that's what makes it investigative. And so I write for some different blogs. I also write for sometimes for Bill Moyers, who of course is the big newsman, and for I've written for Consumer Reports. So I've covered a lot of food and drug, and as I say, a lot of times the food is full of drugs, so there's a real overlap. Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of the main topic I wanted to talk about because you write about so many different areas in into this huge subject, these two areas, that I wanted to focus a little bit on this idea of about the drugs that they're feeding our animals. But before we get there, I'm really curious. So how did you get on this path? I mean, was there any one event in your life that got you moving in this direction? Well, I would say there was two big events that shaped my journalism. One is when I was really, really young. I read an article. It was in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch long before the internet, and it was about factory farming. And it talked about how the hormones that the beef were given and the way the turkeys were bred with their chests so big that they couldn't even mate. And, you know, as I say, I was really young in elementary school, but at that point, I just said, I'm never contributing to this again. I'm never going to eat meat again, and I never did. And it's been more than 40 years. So that was that was one important turning point. It just made me sick. And then the other thing, which was more recent, because most of my career was in advertising, but about 15 years ago, there were two big news reports about unsafe drugs that many people were taking, and one, of course, was the Vioxx, and the other was hormone replacement therapy that almost all women were taking it. In both cases, they were like, well, actually, we were wrong. These drugs are causing deaths or heart attacks or different harmful side effects, and so that caused me to start digging. And I thought, how would this happen? I mean, how could they be so wrong? Aren't there watchdogs? How could so many people be harmed for apparently pharma profits? And when I began digging, and I'm still digging, there was just a trove of information about how pharma buys doctors, buys medical foundations, wings of hospitals, medical schools, how pharma's in bed with the NIH. And the more I dug, the more angry I got, so I just became really furious. But those were the two events. It was the Vioxx and the hormone replacement therapy.
Yeah, and the bottom line here is really that this exists, and sadly, so many people don't know that, and that's why I want you to, because you're the expert on this, and you spend your life digging and finding the truth. And it's so true. I've done other shows. I had a pharmaceutical rep that left the business to now help people with health and diet, and she's a longtime vegan now since she left. And so it's really great for people who have been in the industry or have dug up the papers and the facts and know this stuff, because we can't anymore trust what we read from the very agencies that are supposedly trying to protect us, right? I mean, that is such a scary thing that these agencies are designed to protect us when we look at what they're really doing. It's horrible.
Well, both the USDA and the FDA are so in bed with industry that they're just a joke. I mean, they literally serve industry before the consumers. There's very strong parallels between USDA and FDA, and no, they're not protecting the consumer. About a year, maybe 2 years ago, President Obama nominated and had put in place Dr. Califf, who was a real drug industry person as FDA commissioner, and many of us in the drug safety community were just horrified because this guy he had worked on clinical trials of dangerous drugs. He said that it was good that public health people worked with pharma. I mean, he was terrible. But since then, Dr. Gottlieb has been named FDA commissioner, and he was named by, I believe, President Trump. And he's even worse because he's literally speculating on the stocks that he's supposed to be regulating, the pharma Wall Street stocks. So the FDA is, I hate to say this, but it's just a joke.
Yeah, and what you just said is so true. Sometimes we think we were bad some years ago, and we look now how the situation of everything is, and you go, oh my God, we thought we were bad before, but now this is ridiculous. So really people need to step up to the plate and learn everything themselves, because you can't trust these organizations and what you're eating and what they're telling you will help you fix your disease, because it's all a lie.
There's two websites that I recommend. They're not commercial at all, but you can find out the truth about a drug you're taking if you are taking a drug. And one is called Worst Pills, and it's from Public Citizen, and you'll really hear the truth there. Mm-hmm. The other one is called Ask a Patient. I think it's askapatient.com, and it takes no drug advertising. I know the people that run it. And all it is, you don't even have to register. All it is patients telling patients their experience of different drugs.
That's great.
It's so, it's unfiltered, it's uncensored, it's anonymous, and you will hear things there that are certainly not on the label, that things that pharma doesn't want you to know, and it's like a peer-to-peer education.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. I know the Worst Pills. I used to go there a lot when I had my practice, and I'd look up patient medications sometimes. But that's a great site. So that's good. I'll put that in the show notes so the listeners get that. So was there anyone in your family, like your mom or dad or cousins or anybody like that got wounded by this industry. And in some ways, I can say who hasn't been, because anyone that's been on a drug has been injured by the industry. But was there any particular person or event in your life that also kind of steered you in this direction?
I would say no. I know a lot of drug safety activists are motivated by either they were harmed or someone they knew was harmed or a loved one was killed. And that is not the case with me, but I will say that my mother had a real strong suspicion of chemicals. And she used to say, she'd read the label and she'd just throw it out. She didn't like the, the different dyes that were put in and the different preservatives long before this was really an issue that other people were aware of.
Yeah, it's like she had a sixth sense that she knew couldn't be good.
Absolutely. I mean, she had a real strong suspicion of the chemical industry. And so that did form, sort of my awareness. And also, I would have to say, neither of my parents were really big meat eaters. I mean, once a week we'd have like maybe a little blob of Spam in a casserole. But I got the real, and mostly, I think two reasons. One is meat was more expensive. But secondly, they just didn't like the idea of what happened to the animals. And so I got the really strong sense growing up that meat was optional.
Yeah.
That you could be totally healthy without,
I mean, how lucky, though, that you were exposed at a young age to that idea, because look how many people today just have no idea. And not only that, almost even worse, because with the paleo movement and these Atkins diets or Atkins type diets, they're just basically Atkins with a facelift, most of these diets, although the paleo is a much healthier version because they avoid junk food and they go to whole foods, but then they're consuming, massive amounts of meat because they're getting rid of grains and many veggies, and they're being told that this is healthy. So it's actually much more confusing today, and I think that is the strategy of big pharma often and big ag and all these industries, because if they can just put the shadow of a doubt into the public, then that's usually enough to get people to continue doing, taking the drug or eating the meat. All they need is that little doubt. That's what the tobacco industry did. They just kept putting the shadow of the doubt.
Yes, and of course, with the flavors and the chemicals, they make the stuff so appealing in terms of taste that people think, like, for example, McDonald's or something. I mean, it's so, it's hard to tell someone that something that tastes good to them that this is not good for you. That,
right.
Because their taste buds tell them, and that's the point, that they made it so that your taste buds tell you.
Yeah, they're kind of like legalized drug pushers, but they're just using food to do it. They're sticking chemicals that are addictive into the food, chemicals that are making people gain weight, chemicals that are making people's taste buds crave that same taste. It's like, right. It's intentional. I mean, that's why they sell and make so much money, is because they know they're getting people addicted. And how convenient. If you get them addicted, then you can get them sick. And when you get them sick, then the very industry that's linked to you can, use all their drugs. And then you support that industry to try to get well. It's a very convenient model.
Well, it is. And I've been writing, as I'm sure you saw, a lot about the osteoporosis and GERD. And both of these are really gold mines for pharma and food, because when you talk about the osteoporosis, there's been a lot of scare campaigns for women about, don't have thinning bones. What they don't tell you is that a meat-heavy, meat-intensive diet causes thin bones. And Exhibit A is all the countries that live on, like, plantains and yams. Right. And they don't have much meat. And they're not all bent over like Americans. They're not all full of thin. They're not fracturing. They're not on
I know. And look, we grew up as I saw a movie, and they went all around the world. So it's not just in the U.S. And they said, when I say the word milk, what do you think of? And almost every person said some form of milk does your body good, or milk is calcium for your bones, or milk is an essential protein of life. I mean, it was all having to do with calcium and the bones, and it's so far from the truth, but it just shows you how strong these campaigns, they just get right into the psyche and it becomes a fact.
Well, absolutely. The thin bone thing is just a Western diet phenomenon. And then the other thing that I rail against all the time is the SSRIs, the antidepressants, which it is estimated that a fourth of the population is on them.
I believe that.
We could talk a lot about how people probably don't need them, but there is a side effect that's not really well publicized, and that is the fact that they leach the calciums off the bones. I know people, who are close associates of mine who are fracturing right and left, and they're not even old. Their ankle or their shoulder, because they've been on these SSRIs for 10, 15 years.
Yeah, and that's the drug I saw when I saw patients. I would say every other patient was on an antidepressant. It's amazing how many people take these drugs.
Were you able to get any of these people off?
Yeah, for sure. But the thing is, a lot of people that come to a homeopath, because just to even be open enough to try homeopathy and come to a homeopath, they're usually coming because they want to get off, or
right.
they don't feel like, they'll say, I was crying all the time before, and now I'm not crying, but I definitely don't feel like me. That was a common line I heard a lot. Mm-hmm. That even though they may be functioning better, that they still didn't feel well. But we should do a whole episode on, like 2-3 drugs like that. Yes. But let's move on and talk about. I wanted to tell you one thing, because I don't think you know this, but when I asked you if any of your family members were hurt, well, my mom actually died of a flu shot, so it's been one of the driving forces in my life. And it wasn't. I was way into this work before my mom passed, but my dad's a medical doctor, and he, after, my mom, she acquired Guillain-Barré from a flu shot and died from the complications of that some years after that. But yeah, it was really sad. So,
I'm so sorry.
I'm a really big advocate of, just trying to get the truth out there to people, because you can't just walk into your pharmacy and get your flu shot and not know what the ramifications may be. If you choose to do it, that's up to you, but you should know the truth about what the side effects may be or could happen. So anyway, that's part of my story. But
wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, it's a really sad thing, but it's also been a big drive behind my work. So I always feel like my mom's pushing me to go in this direction and tell people about all the dangerous chemicals. So, and that part, I feel like, rewarded for having that lesson, so I can help save so many other people. Okay, so let's talk about this idea. I saw your article. I think it was in either salon.com, or maybe it was in the alt one that you write too. Mm-hmm. And it was about all the drugs in our factory farmed animals. And when I saw that article, I said, oh my gosh, I've got to get Martha on my show. So can you talk a little bit about what really goes on in these factory farms animals and what's actually allowed?
Well, I would say, first of all, it's a lot worse than anybody thinks. People are aware of the antibiotics, which are certainly an issue, but there's a lot of other things that they're all allowed and they're not reported on. And if they were on the label, I think a lot of people wouldn't eat that meat. But okay, first of all, we know the antibiotics are still in wide use. In fact, their use is going up, and they're used because less feed is used to produce more poundage or weight gain of the animals. So the farmer, and that's in quotes farmer, the factory farmer, makes more money from the antibiotics. The FDA made a couple of gestures to restrict them, but the gestures are a joke because they're kind of the honor system. They've asked pharma to relabel the farm antibiotics to only be used for sickness, not for weight gain. And what I have different sources from that I talk to say that farmers will simply redefine what sickness is, but anyway, the use of the antibiotics is going up. Okay, so first of all, residues of the antibiotics themselves are found in the meat, and they're not just in the meat; they're in the manure. I read a really chilling article in which they found the antibiotics in crops, so they go up the stalks of like lettuce and cabbage. So it's like they're, even if you're vegan, you're getting the antibiotics. So that's a huge one, but it's not the only one.
Yeah, that's scary. Wow.
Well, because it's in the manure, it's everywhere. Okay,
yeah.
So then the next thing, you talk about vaccines. There's a huge amount of vaccines that these animals get, and few people talk about it. The Office of Inspector General has written a little bit about the vaccines and the heavy metals, but the animals, of course, they're at risk of many diseases. So the vaccines are they're underreported, but any animal you eat probably has, or let's say many of the beef and pork have had these vaccines to keep them alive. So that's one thing which needs more reporting.
Which probably means there's a heavy dose of mercury in there.
Well, exactly. They call it heavy metals, but the office, I will give the government some credit that it does try to inspect itself. And a few years ago, there was an Office of Inspector General report that revealed that many animals that with these different issues like the heavy metals were released to the public as food anyway. So it's not like the government totally denies it. It's just you have to dig, and then no laws are made following the revelations. But anyway, there's the vaccines. Then there's, I've written a lot about ractopamine, which is a beta agonist, and ractopamine is kind of like an asthma drug. And really, the use began in pork in 97, and then it went into beef and turkey. And even, I'm sure you've heard of Temple Grandin.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, and she spoke out against it. I mean, there's many issues why we don't want it in the meat, and it has to do with what it does to the animal. It's supposed to produce more muscle, less fat, so it's just like the antibiotics. It's motivated by profit.
Jeez.
But what the side effects in the animal can become muscle bound and not be able to walk, and then they have to electroprod the animal on his way to slaughter. Ractopamine is not removed before slaughter, and the Big Ag says, well, it's not in the meat. I can't say it's in the meat, but I can say if it's not in the meat, it's in the urine and manure and in the ground,
Yeah, and I mean, in my opinion, like, how could it not be in the meat? I mean, if a person or an animal is taking a drug, it metabolizes somehow. It doesn't, even if it just comes out the urine, there has to be some residue effect, but whatever, even if we can't prove this, the fact that it could be in your meat is enough to get rid of it.
Well, exactly. And one thing I tell people who are interested in meat safety is a lot of the meat that we eat here in the U.S. is absolutely banned in many, many countries in the world. And ractopamine is one example. Like China won't take it. I think Japan, certainly Korea. Our beef with ractopamine is not allowed as an import to other countries. And of course, the main example of that is our hormone-saturated beef is banned in the whole EU, European Union. If people realize that, they might ask, well, why are we eating something that, like, all these countries, I think it's 30 countries, won't touch? And the European Union literally says in their documentation, we do not want this beef because the hormones in it are highly correlated with breast and prostate cancer. Jeez. And so I have never seen a really good study comparing our prostate and breast cancer with EU, but, you can kind of guess.
Yeah, right. And I mean, just in general, even without all that stuff added to animals, just eating an animal that never had that, just the protein of an animal is already carcinogenic, as the China study pointed out. But now look what we're doing and what we're putting in these things. It's so dangerous, and people just have no idea. And it's like you said, the fact that all these other countries won't accept our meat. Wow, that just has to show you how we're driven more by money. We have unhealthier people. I interviewed this guy. He was a GMO scientist professor, and he said the allowance of GMO glyphosate allowed in our food in America is so many times. I forget how many times, but it was like way, way, way more times allowed here. And when he came for a visit, just staying 7 days, his friends took a urine sample here before he left, and he had the glyphosate rate of an American just being here 7 days. So, we allow more of everything dangerous. We allow all these things that other countries don't allow. Like they allowed labeling of their genetically modified foods, and we can't do that.
Right,
and
right.
There's all these things that they don't allow that we allow. And it makes you realize, wow, then I guess this country is just more corrupt and driven by the dollar. And that's really sad because we're looked up in the world, and a lot of people try to copy us, but gosh, anymore, you'd think they'd be crazy to do that.
Well, yeah, and I'm always shocked at how little coverage there is of the fact that our meat is not it's banned elsewhere. And then, all right, another example, getting back for a second to the antibiotics, in addition to residues from them, they obviously, overuse of antibiotics encourages antibiotic-resistant bacteria, like MRSAs and that type of thing.
Yeah, the super daddy bugs.
Right. And so Consumer Reports and other sources have found these antibiotic-resistant microbes in the food because of the overuse of antibiotics, and they can kill. And there was a big, I don't remember if it was Foster Farms, some big chicken producer had an outbreak of one of these antibiotic-resistant microbes in its chicken, and it was so bad, Deborah, that they said, if you throw it out, package it up in your garbage so the wildlife don't even eat it. It was
God.
I know. I couldn't believe it.
Oh my gosh. I know. If I honestly think, I sometimes say to myself, what is it going to take for people? Mm-hmm. I mean, partly, yes, I'm a vegan because I love animals and I couldn't eat them. But part of me just always says, like, what is it going to take? I mean, how much do people have to know before it's enough for them to stop eating it? Because it's even if you want just the selfish point of view of your own health, it's so destructive to your own health. It's creating a huge early death and a big wave of all kinds of cancers. And we're so toxic already just in the environment, let alone now all this stuff we're just putting in our bodies every day. And I just think, like, what is it going to take? And why is it? And I'm curious of your idea on this. Just why is it that people either don't know about it? Is it that they don't want to know so they can just keep eating and living the life that they want to, and they're afraid they wouldn't be able to change? Or because, I mean, it's getting harder and harder to have an excuse to say you don't know that something's not good for you.
Well, I think habit. I think that what we're going to see happen, maybe not in our lifetimes, but what will happen is that big meat will discover the like the meat that's made from non-slaughter, like the cell meat, that's made in the test tubes, or like a big dairy producer began doing soy milk instead of dairy. So I think they'll see that there's money in non-meat.
Yeah.
And I think that if you walked, I'm a big baseball fan, and they say that 17,000 hot dogs are eaten during a game, like here in Chicago. Okay, now if those tasted, if the guy walking up offering it to you was offering like a soy dog that tasted just as good, people would eat it. So I think it's what's available.
Yeah.
And the irony is, if people made no change in their diet except had meat substitutes that tasted just as good,
Right.
their weight would drop, their blood pressure would drop, their cholesterol would drop, and they wouldn't even they wouldn't have to make any change except getting the meat out of their diet.
And our insurance premiums would drop because we wouldn't have to pay for all these sick people like this. It's out of control.
Yeah, so in other words, I don't blame people. I don't think anyone at a baseball game is going to say, no, I'm going to walk a block away to get, a soy dog. But I think that if that was what was offered, down the road, I think we'll see that, because there's no reason to kill an animal for a product that's absolutely as dangerous as
killing
cigarettes.
Right. I mean, in the end, they're getting the ultimate revenge because the animal's killing the human, but it's at the life and sacrifice of the animal. But it's so prevalent. Do you think that if every person, well, like the saying, if every factory farm had glass walls, that people wouldn't be able to eat it? Do you think if people could actually visually see or watch one of those horrible movies that show the truth about what's going on in the lives of these animals, do you think that would get a lot more people away from eating meat?
Well, I'm sorry to say that has not had an effect. Since the internet, there are ample examples of what goes on, and it hasn't had a big effect. And I've been very intrigued with this question, because for me, I would stop eating meat. I mean, I just read about it in the newspaper. It was in the newspaper.
Exactly.
But I think what happens, first of all, if you really think of like war, okay, an editor in a newspaper or on the video will show, children mangled, this and that, and it doesn't really make a difference. And, I mean, you'd think they'd say, well, why, so I think what happens is when some people certainly look at the goriness and the cruelty and they say, that's it, I'm not eating meat. And I know a lot of these people. But I think a lot of others, first of all, won't look. But secondly, if they do look...
That's a big category.
But secondly, if they do look, they're going to say, well, that's an exception, or that's sad, but that's not the meat I'm eating, or... How would me not eating this change that? Or they have the denial structures.
Right. That's so true. You hit that right on the head. And, a lot of people, especially when you're a vegan, you're not even saying anything or pushing anyone in a direction, but they may have heard you were, or they asked you a question, or you were at a restaurant with them and you're ordering, and then when you say or they may say, how long have you been a vegan or something? And as soon as you say that, almost always the other person's line who's not is, well, I don't eat much meat and I only eat good meat, like not factory farm. But what people don't realize, every single restaurant meal you eat out, well, I shouldn't say every, but there's so few restaurants that really, are serving like, cattle that's raised on 5 acres. And even those factory, non-factory farm animals, they go to slaughter the last 30 days anyway, so they end up with a lot of this toxic stuff. But yeah, it's interesting that people just want to be in denial. They always want to say that they're not eating much of it. And, I don't like to judge people. And when I get in that situation, I just say, that's fine if that's what they need to do, because people all have to come to this at their own pace. I'm not a person that likes to feel pushy. I mean, I feel so sad for the animals. I wish I could push people in that direction, but it's just not my nature. So I usually just know that everyone comes to a journey on their own for a reason, and hopefully they'll see that. And I don't say anything to that, and I let it go. But the truth is that, I do think those kind of movies, like, there are a lot of people in my life that I know love animals. This is where I feel torn. Like, I know how much they love animals, and they cry when they hear a horrible story about an animal, and yet they eat meat at every meal. And I don't get the disconnect. And if I were to say, oh, you guys should watch this movie, they always say, oh, no, I can't watch that. But yet, they are participating in slaughtering of, 88 billion land animals a year? And
you're absolutely right. It's a disconnect. You're absolutely right. And preaching does not help people.
No.
I used to be really interested. I used to interview people. What moment made you vegan or vegetarian? Back before vegan, it was more vegetarian. And one lady told me she had seen a show on cat experiments, and she loved her cat so much, and somehow that did it for her.
Mm-hmm.
But another couple I talked to, and this is really icky, but it's true. Somebody had fallen on the telephone wires and been electrocuted, and they said the smell from this person was identical to a barbecue.
Wow.
And that made them quit. And of course that's true. And I always say there is a point at which I would eat meat if I were like starving, but it's very close to the point where I'd eat people.
Yeah.
You know?
Right, exactly. I know. It just makes, like, for someone like you and I who have been there for a long time, yeah, it's not even a possibility. It would be like, can't do it, just can't do it, because it doesn't make any sense when you look at that being and you love that being, and how can you love your dog and eat a pig? I love pigs so much. They're very amazing, special animals. There's something about a pig. And I just, I don't see it, and I couldn't do it. It would be too hard. But you're exactly right. And I think it's one of the bad raps that, vegan's a hard word because they have that reputation behind that word of being people that are so dogmental that they just push people in, and they feel better than everyone else. And I really want to lose that, because that's not helpful. You know what I mean? As much as
you're right.
Vegans love animals and they want to see as many animals saved. But look, everybody, we all, at some point when we were born, we ate. And when I became a vegetarian vegan, it was vegetarian first because you don't know, but I hated mayo and butter and milk and all this stuff. But look, even up for years later, my mom would make some dishes that I still ate even when I was a vegetarian, because you don't know like that, that had eggs in it, or eggs are wrong, or, there was some cheese in that dish, because you're just doing your best to get on that journey. All I knew that is I really didn't want to eat animals, and I hated the taste of it, and it really bothered me. And that was the turning point for me. But, some people, they may not get there. They're not there yet. And we can't push people there, because then there's resistance. You can't do that. So I always feel like it's always better to lead by example and let the people that have questions that are interested in changing answer their questions, and let it happen. And it is happening. But because I'm a homeopath and I had a healthcare practice, and I was just seeing how many people were sick, I had a responsibility to tell my patients that, you have to look at also your lifestyle. You can't just come to a homeopath and just eat pizza every day and chips and coffee and think that I can give you a remedy and your autoimmune disease is going to go away. Now, even if it did, I wouldn't feel good as a homeopath that same person isn't going to get sick with cancer soon, because they're still living an unhealthy lifestyle and eating an unhealthy diet. So I think in the end, people have to, even if the first step is that, and it should be your first step, you need to eat well for you so that you can live a healthy life. Whether it's a long life or not, we never have control of. But why not have energy, feel as best as you can feel, and be able to participate in life rather than be drugged out, and all the drugs that you're on creating other symptoms that will require more drugs. That's a choice we all have. And if we do that for ourselves first, then what I found when people do that and they move to a plant-based diet, or even a heavily plant-based diet, then they start becoming, like, as my friend Dr. Reese says, their compassionate gene gets turned on once they're there for a while. Because I agree, think they realize, don't you? They realize then.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And, it's one thing that makes me so angry is every so often you'll hear the accusation that vegan eating is elitist or expensive, and I get so angry at that.
Yeah, me too.
And, because that's a myth from the meat industry. It's like, well, they're actually, you remove meat and cheese and eggs from your diet, you're going to spend less
Exactly. Yeah, and I did a show because Ellen Jaffe Jones wrote a book on eating vegan $4 a day. So
Wow.
And she's like a math genius, so she like calculated it all out. So we talked about that on one of my episodes, so I could debunk that idea, because that's a horrible thing that people think it's expensive. Some of the healthiest foods are grains and then beans, and they're so cheap. And they replace your meat, and you're already saving like 50% of your budget. So that's
right,
crazy.
and you're not having the pesticides and the vaccines. But getting back, Deborah, to the risks of the meat or the chemicals in the meat, because of the antibiotic resistant bacteria in the meat, or even bacteria that aren't antibiotic resistant, but just the germs. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What big meat does is it has different ways of retarding the growth so that people will buy this and eat it. And one thing they do is chlorine baths, and this is done with chickens. They dip them in chlorine because they know that they're full of germs. And there's been a big trade war over Russia does not want our chlorine-dipped chicken,
Oh my God!
And they, this. If you read the trade wars, you see it, but you don't see it in general consume. You certainly don't see it on the Food Network.
And why? Why? I mean, are they just doing a lot of energy work to try to hide this from the public?
I think so. Yeah, because it tells you first of all, it's icky. But secondly, it tells you that what you're eating is potentially so full of germs. But then there's another example, which is still done. There was some publicity about it a few years ago, but it's still done, which is the atmospheric packaging, where the meat, and this is mostly, I think, beef or red meat, it's literally packaged with carbon dioxide to keep the meat red.
Wow.
So that people will buy it, and because the idea is that, the pre-existing germs, that actually, just keeping it red, it doesn't have to do with germs, but the idea that this meat is treated with a gas to look red, even though it may be 2 weeks old. Okay, so that's also pretty repulsive.
Yeah. Yeah, that's horrible. And when they do that, does that have anything to do with the pink slime that they are adding to meat?
Well, the pink slime is also related to the bacteria. The pink slime were they called it finely textured beef, and when it first broke as a news story, the place that produced it closed down. It was in the school lunches, and the public has a short memory, which Big Meat is happy about that. And now the plant is back up and running. But what was going on with that, and is going on with that because it's happening again, is that, again, the germs in the beef are so entrenched that it's almost assumed it has E. coli. It's just assumed. And so as this beef, this pink slime, would move along the assembly line, it was treated with ammonia gas puffs, to kill the E. coli. Okay, so they said that the ammonia puffs in and of themselves were not dangerous, but it's just the thought of it.
Oh, my God.
That rather than, I know, and when people realized that this was going to the school lunch program, which is a federal program, and their kids were eating it, there was a real outrage. But this was 5 years ago, and people forget. It's like the carbon dioxide you know what? I'm wrong on that. Carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide. People forgot about it, and they're still doing it. So, and with the pink slime, the same thing. And then the final one that people should think about, and they don't eat well, as you must know from your own patients. People just don't care or don't think. But anyway, the nitrites and nitrates, which would be in your cured hams and your bacon, and certainly Slim Jims, which I bet you and I have never eaten one.
I've never had one.
But the nitrites and nitrates, they turn into nitrosamines in the body, which are they're carcinogenic. They can cause cancer. And when I give lectures, I always say to people, if you do nothing else, never eat a cured ham or bacon, because you're just saying, give me cancer, is what you really are.
Yeah,
and
they're so dangerous to the body.
They're highly. I think they're really the same ingredient found in cigarette smoke. Now, it is true that some progressive companies have taken the nitrites out of bacon, so they have nitrate-free bacon. Which, if somebody eats bacon, that's better. But again, the things that are put, and that's for preserve. Why are they put in there? They're put in there for two reasons. One is to retard the growth of the bacteria that pre-exist, and the other is, I think, for coloration.
Mm-hmm.
To produce that yummy pink color, and the people are eating this stuff.
Jeez. Okay, it's time for your break, so walk around and get a drink of water. And while you do that, I just want to say thank you to Armita, my friend Armita. Thank you so much for your donation. I really appreciate that. It's so cool that you're listening to the podcast and supporting me in any way that you can. I so appreciate that. So thanks from the bottom of my heart. And the next thing I just want to tell you guys is be sure that you're subscribed to the podcast. I just realized that many people are listening, but they're not subscribed. And if you hit that subscribe button, that helps me even more than reviews. So please be sure that you're subscribed. That will help me so much. And lastly, thanks again for using that Amazon banner, everyone. You know I appreciate that. If you haven't done it, holiday seasons are coming, and I sure would be appreciative if you'd use the Amazon banner on the vidalspeaks.com website for all your shopping needs. All right, you guys, you ready to get back to listen to more of Martha Rosenberg tell us about this stuff? I am. Here we go. And when you were talking about the antibiotics, that's such a big subject, and a lot of companies will say antibiotic free, and so people think they're safe. But when you have like 6 different problems in the meat, and antibiotics is only one, okay, you may have one that company is not doing, right, but they're probably doing the other 5. So it's still, it's still bad. But the one of the family of antibiotics that I have a passionate to get the word out is the quinolone. I think the full name is the fluoroquinolone, because I had 3 patients in my practice that took fluoroquinolones. For one guy had a prostatitis, and he was given Levaquin, which is the quinolone. And literally after the 3rd pill, he became, he definitely is kind of, I would say, handicapped for life. And he had all the neurological problems, and he could barely walk, and all his tendons got torn. But more than the tendons problem, which is from that family, he had all this neurological sensation. And one of the really interesting things that linked the connection to me about meat and antibiotics was he said, I cannot eat any meat anymore because every time I take a bite of chicken, all my symptoms get activated.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So it just goes to show you how much is in the flesh of these antibiotics. And those back then were the super daddy antibiotics. Now they have bigger ones, but I'm sure they're still using quinolone antibiotics, or are they not? Did they finally get those out?
That is a very good question. First of all, I don't know why Levaquin is even on the market anymore.
Yeah, and or Cipro, or any of them.
Right. I mean, it's absolutely a shock that, and here is something else that really shocked me. Do you remember, I think it was maybe last summer when Hillary Clinton had gone to the 9/11 event and she collapsed?
Yeah.
And they said she had pneumonia and she collapsed.
Right.
Well, you didn't have to Google far to find out that she was on Levaquin.
I know. I remember that.
You just wonder what kind of the top doctor in the whole country, prescribing to one of the most powerful people wouldn't know?
Well, I tell listeners on this show, and I told every one of my patients, and my family members all know this, that if they ever have to go to the hospital, when I had to go to the hospital for a pneumonia, I immediately tell them I'm highly allergic to all the fluoroquinolones. and they put a red bracelet on my hand that says no fluoroquinolones. And when I was in the hospital for my pneumonia, the doctor came and sat on my bed when he went to release me, and he said, okay, you're still very sick, because he knew I was a homeopath and I might not take my drugs. So when you go home, you need to take your antibiotics that I'm giving you here, and you need to finish them. And then he hands me the prescription, and I look down and it says Levaquin, and I'm thinking, I just held my arm up to him with my bracelet. I didn't say one word. I just held it up. And he just said, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And I'm thinking, wow, how many patients don't know that Levaquin is a quinolone? Or how many patients take that pill that have an allergy or a problem to it? And so, yeah, you have to learn these things. And that's a family. Now, I'm sure there's a bunch of other ones, but that's one that I know that I don't ever want to be given. So I put it on my chart that I have a high allergy to that drug, and everyone should, because there are so many problems with tendon tears and joint problems with these drugs. So that's something my listeners have heard me say before. So I'm glad that you brought that up. But I'm sure they're using lots of antibiotics in our meat still, but even though there's been laws that they're trying to say that it's better now, right? But the laws just kind of make more loopholes, I think.
Well, I think that they're still in the meat, but there's certainly the fluoroquinolones are certainly widely prescribed. Mm-hmm. And I also know someone who developed the tendon impairment in his two hands. Mm-hmm. He could no longer type, and he was a writer. He went to doctors, and the doctor said, well, it's carpal tunnel. Even though they knew he was on there's such denial on the part of the doctors.
Right, because they don't want to take responsibility for, like, the drug caused it, because even if you tell them, couldn't this be from the drug, they'll say, no, that's not likely, and then people stop there. But you can't stop there. You got to do your own research, and you got to know, because... And then the other problem with these kind of drugs, as you said, is now we're just feeding them, they're giving them to animals that are sick. They're giving them to animals to get them fatter, which is a bigger use. They're giving them to animals to prevent from getting sick. And so and I read in one article you wrote how they were putting the quinolone drugs in the water of the chickens. So that's how the chickens were getting them. And so now every person saying, oh, I don't do antibiotics, but they're eating chicken 5 times a week that's filled with quinolone antibiotics. So you are doing antibiotics on a regular basis. And now we're all, even those of us that don't want to be, taking these drugs, we're all in trouble now with the super bugs that are around the corner and coming back.
Well, exactly. Nobody's off the hook. It's a systemic problem. That like I was saying, even in the crops, even in the corn and the cabbage, mm-hmm. and so there's no way around it. And the antibiotics are even in the drinking water. And this, I predict that this will be a new area of news that will come out over the next few years. Municipal drinking systems do not have the ability to take out drugs.
Right.
Okay. And they don't want to admit that. But you start reading about. I am reading a little bit where they're concerned about. So many people are on Prozac or SSRIs, and it goes right into the drinking water. Another one, of course, is the plastic beads from cosmetics are also not filtered out in the drinking water.
Yeah, that's a horrible problem, especially for our oceans.
But they found that in areas where the drugs are manufactured, that fish behavior is completely different. And the SSRIs cause fish that changes their personality, and of course the estrogens and the hormones in the beef and those feminize, so you read a lot about the intersex fish. They're no longer male or female. They're both,
Right, I've heard that.
It's really, it's not just what we eat, though, of course, I'm not going to eat that stuff, but it's also the whole environment.
Well, that's the sad part, that, it's all of our home, and it's our only home, and what what some people are doing to the earth. And when you eat meat, you're contributing to that issue and that problem. And that's a big reason in this modern day to go plant-based, because not only can you improve your own health and return back to health and get rid of your disease, but you can feel good about contributing to a healthy planet instead of, watching it die. So there's so many reasons now that are pointing to a plant-based diet, and I hope many of my listeners I know are making the effort to move in that direction, because a lot of them have written me, and I'm excited about that. And I just try to tell people, like, do whatever you can. If you can't do it overnight, and for some people that's not healthy, just do it once a week and then 3 times a week, or eat vegan all the way to dinner, and then whatever. There's so many books out there to how to transition, and there's so many transitional foods, like you said, these meats, like that Beyond Meat burger. I can't even eat that burger. I tried it. It's so like meat that it's so scary for me. I really can't do it. It makes my stomach turn. I can't do it. And
yeah,
boy,
I know what you mean. I eat at the Whole Foods sometimes, and they'll have like a vegan pizza, and they put seitan on there, which is supposed to resemble sausage, and I can't eat because it's too much like sausage.
Yeah, some of this stuff is really, really identical, and there's really no excuse. It's a lot easier today. So, and just the world is sick. We're losing so many friends in their 50s. Lloyd just came to me today and, said that our friend he's in his 50s, stage 2 prostate cancer. And it's like, we have 2 other friends with throat cancer. I lost to a friend last year to throat cancer, lost 3 friends before that of ours that had, multiple myeloma. And I mean, these are all people like under 62. So it's really happening. I mean, it's not that we're just getting older. Yes, we're getting older, but back when my parents were this age, they weren't losing lots of friends in their 50s. They were losing, their parents' friends. But now we're losing our own friends in this age. So we're not going to get away with it anymore. The world is too toxic. So I really always try to, educate people. I don't want to push people, as I said, but I just like to tell people the truth, because if we know the truth, I always say knowledge is power, right? Knowledge is power, and health is freedom. That's my line. If you have health, you have true freedom. If you are on a bunch of pharmaceuticals and you are having certain diseases, then you're not feeling your best, and you're not able to do your best work, and you're not able to feel the most energy. And those drugs you're taking are going to bog you down and create more problems. So it's just like, health is freedom and knowledge is power. So just learn the truth. And that's why I do the work. And I'm sure a lot of why you do the work, because it's a little bit of a risk to write the way you do. Have you ever been worried that you might get taken out?
Well, yes, I really have thought about, somebody could just shoot you to shut you up.
Right.
But, because there's money at stake, But as far as being sued, I'm kind of judgment-proof. I always make a joke, like, what are they going to do, take my bicycle? I mean, I don't have, I mean, if I were at a university or a teacher, I couldn't say the things that you and I are saying,
Mm-hmm.
So it's wonderful that we have the freedom to just tell the truth and, point out to people. I think a lot of people, Deborah, think, well, if this is true, why haven't I heard it? What you and I are saying. And the reason is because big food is probably the biggest advertiser on TV.
Yep.
Right after Big Pharma. So, of course, the media isn't going to say that their advertisers are killing you,
Yeah, of course not. And yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to ask you. Like, what do you say to people if they say, if this were true, then the very organizations like you were talking about, the USDA and the FDA, they're out there to protect us, and they can't be outright killing us intentionally with the practices that they're doing just to make a profit. That's impossible. So what do you tell people like that? Because that is what they're doing. They know what they're doing. It's not an accident.
Well, I think I would just point to reputable sources. I mean, there are sources on, National Library of Congress or the medical, literature there are reputable sources that prove that we're not just making this stuff up. But yeah, I hate to throw it out like this, but it really is capitalism. It's just capitalism. And if there's money in it, what will happen if somebody dies, especially from a drug, but possibly from food also? What will characteristically happen is the corporation who's caused the harm will give a big settlement, even millions, with a gag order. So the harm will not come out there. So people will still. So their policy is just harm people and pay them off and keep moving ahead.
Yeah, they've done that in the drug industry. I remember with Vioxx, and sometimes they figure into their calculation, okay, we'll probably lose 5,000 people in deaths to this drug, but in the end we'll get 2 million people on this drug, and that will be worth it to pay off so many lawsuits. It's amazing. It's like a calculation. It's not even a thought about 5,000 lives. I mean, it's
exactly.
sick.
And now, with the PDUFA, which allows a drug company to pay for a fast approval, what you have is, it's sort of the same with movies. They'll hype a movie, and by the time people realize it stinks, they've made their money. Okay.
Yeah.
They'll get a drug on the market very quickly and make their money before the risks emerge, because it's quicker and quicker to market. And one example, I'm sure you're aware of the Hep C drugs. That cost $1,000 a pill. They rush that to the market, and they're looting Medicare and Medicaid because it's so expensive, and many of the people, like who have Hep C, they might be in prison, they might be on Medicaid, but they moved it to the market so quickly, they didn't even have on the label that if you take this Hep C drug, you're highly likely to have Hep B activated if it's in your system, which has killed people. They didn't even put a warning, and then they backpedal, and they're like, oh, we'll add a warning. Well, no, you already made your money, our taxpayer money.
Yeah, see, I know, once they get you, but in the end, you have to live and die by your choices. So I don't try to tell people what to choose, but they need to learn so that they can make a choice that they can live and die by. There's no guarantee, like in the cancer industry, another huge money-making industry that's all corrupt. Okay, you can choose to do chemo, and you can choose to not do chemo and do it some natural way. And whatever resonates with you and feels right to you, okay, then so be it. But don't just get feared into a treatment by your doctor and not know the other side, because then when you die, it's like you didn't have the knowledge to make a better choice. So you want to choose the food you eat with the knowledge about, what you're putting in your body and what the ramifications are. You want to choose to take a drug or not to take a drug from knowing what you can read and know about that drug. And then when you make a choice, then that's a choice you're going to have to learn to live with, either way that it turns out.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And ProPublica had a series a few years ago, I think it was called Dollars for Docs, and anybody can go there and you can look up your doc and see who's paying him, if anyone. And that is really useful, because if your doctor is saying, this is a great pill, and then you look up and you see that he took a payment from that company, I mean, the information is available if people do a little digging.
Yeah, well, we need to get better diggers, right? We need to all become better diggers. Because too many people just believe what they read, and they don't even look at who wrote the article. And 99.9% of what people are reading are studies funded by the very industry that's making the drug or the food. So, well,
that's exactly right. It's just amazing how even reporters will just repeat what they're told.
Yeah.
As stenographers, and they'll just say, like, for example, they're trying to bring back hormone replacement therapy. And they're like, it may have new benefits, or it may not kill as badly as we said. And then you look, and you look at who funded it, and it's the same, it's the usual suspects. And they just wait about 5 years, and nobody remembers, and then they come back with the same lies. So, but on a brighter note, though, I think that power in consumers, and I think consumers, demanded antibiotic-free meat. They've demanded ractopamine-free meat. Personally, I don't think they should even eat meat, but it does show that there's money and there's power in the purse.
Right. And that's really the only power we really have today is if everyone believed in doing something differently and they didn't support the other way that it was doing, well, then that company would go under. They'd be bankrupt. So if you don't like something, then don't support it in any way. And if you don't like animal cruelty and you're an animal lover, then every time you eat or buy a piece of meat at the store, you're supporting to the very thing you don't like and you don't want to see. So that's what I try to tell people is that the power is in your dollar, really. If you don't like something, don't buy it don't support it because that's how change is going to be in numbers. And if all of us say the same thing, it will change eventually.
Well, you're absolutely right. And one example is the breast cancer activists really targeted the endocrine disruptors, the phthalates, the fragrances. And now you start seeing shampoo, no fragrance, no phthalates,
Right.
And that is a direct result of our activist brothers and sisters.
Yeah, I know. This is where we need to move in that direction. And hopefully with modern day, technology, we can do that and we can speak. And because a lot of people buy on the internet and they can do research on the internet and then they can say, "Ooh, I'm not buying that shampoo because I now know that phthalates are bad for me and there's a fragrance in there, so I'm not going to buy that." So that's cool. I do. I'm an optimist. I like to, as much as possible, see the bright side of things, although we're getting ourselves in such a situation with the planet that it's harder and harder to be an optimist, but we just all have to keep doing our own part and step up to the plate and live a life that's more from the good, for just the good of ourselves and for the good of others and the earth, and then we can see change. So I'm just always trying to be as positive as possible. And I agree with you that we're moving in the direction of probably going to some kind of synthetic meat more and more because it's just not sustainable what we're doing, not only in our health, but just the land. We're not going to be able to produce more and more animals and more grains and more water. It's just not going to work.
No, you're absolutely right. The toll, the environmental toll, I can remember, as much as 40 years ago, they were starting to cut down the Amazon to graze cattle. I mean, this has been going on forever.
Yeah, right. It's just heartbreaking to me. It's just, I hear a sentence like that and I just want to faint. And then I often say, I was too sensitive to be born into this world because just the thought about cutting down an Amazon forest with all these medicinal trees and herbs and plants and funguses and all the shamans that used all those plants as healing. And now it's gone because they needed to make a few bucks in the lumber industry or to make more paper to send us advertisements or to do whatever, to grow more grain to feed our poor animals that are being tortured. So it's just a hard thought for me, but I just try to keep doing the positive work to spread the message. And that's what makes me feel good about it in the end, is that I can live my life, going down to telling the truth. And that's how it has to be for me. So that's my important thing.
You're doing a good job. And we do read, more and more people are on the internet seeking information and, like you say, buying things. And so you're having a difference by being available to people.
Yeah, and that there's more and more people that are, podcasting is so popular now, and there's more and more people getting the word out, and there's a lot more people that are becoming vegan or plant-based. It's a movement that they say is one of the biggest movements of 2017, so that's really encouraging. So I just think, we just keep moving in that direction, keep doing the work. It's obviously that this is your life work to do, to get to the truth and to get the truth out to people. So hopefully we just keep plugging away and the impact will get bigger and bigger. So it's fantastic. Yeah. Now, I want to ask you a little bit about your term drug deficiencies. I was very interested in your book when you call it drug deficiencies. Can you explain what that is?
Well, sure. What pharma does, and I used to be in marketing and advertising, so I'm really aware of marketing initiatives, and what pharma has tried to do to sell drugs, and also Big Food does it, is they call it a deficiency. And I think that one example is the brain imbalance, the chemical imbalance theory behind depression, okay? Mm-hmm. And which has never been proven. It's just made up by pharma. It's not true, and they keep looking for brain scans to prove like a visual state of brain that shows depression, which of course you can't do that. But anyway, so the idea of the chemical imbalance, you have a serotonin deficiency, or you have what is the other one? The SNRI, the neuro. What was the other one? Anyway, the brain chemical deficiencies, and they used it to sell many of these psychoactive drugs, the psychiatric drugs. And it's a lie, but
right.
People love it because they're saying in effect that almost like your physiology knew that their product was coming, and that you're not normal and right because you're lacking their product. I mean, it's really insidious advertising, like, well, you're not right without our product. Well, no, actually, you existed long before their product,
Yeah.
But the chemical imbalance theory of the brain, which is allegedly causes depression, and it's just a lie. And so that's the one deficiency. You have a deficiency of our antidepressant, or our mood stabilizer, or our atypical antipsychotic. But in Big Meat, we saw a real area of deficiency marketing with calcium in milk, and you referred to this earlier. It's not as much now because it failed, but the idea was, your bones are going to get thin, and you're going to fracture, or you're going to look ugly, which is the dog whistle message, because you're not drinking milk. And this, the milk lobby has been advertising milk forever, and all the ads, the mustache and everything, have not worked. Milk drinking is dropping every year for reasons like oat milk, soy milk, hemp milk, rice milk. I mean, there's so many milk substitutes that don't
for sure.
kill veal calves,
Yeah, right. And that don't kill us with the human growth factors in them, so...
Right, and the cholesterol and the pus and the antibiotics. And
what a filthy, horrible food.
But anyway, the milk, lobby had tried to say you have a calcium deficiency. And certainly we need calcium, but there's many wonderful sources. And, people say, yeah, but I don't want to eat kale. Kale is not the only source of calcium,
Right.
There's many sources of calcium that don't rely on the dairy industry. And when you mention like the non-sustainability, when you think of a dairy farm, which they're called like crack houses, rural crack houses, because of the manure pollution, they're a blight on the environment, they're a blight on workers, they're a blight on animals. But to go through all that, impregnate a cow, so she has a veal calf, which they'll slaughter immediately, to produce milk when you could just have like oat milk or,
and they're also delicious and so much healthier for us. I know it makes absolutely no sense. But I love the sentence you put in your book when you said, drugs, when the drugs are ready, the disease will follow. So it's like you said, they invent a drug and then they market this because now you have a deficiency. So it's their way to get you to buy the drug that they just spent money on to invent, and now they got to put a huge campaign behind it to get you to support them. So I love that line. That was a good one. So Martha, before we end, I have a couple more questions, but one of them is with the, what are the three biggest secrets or the darkest things that you've learned, or the three things that you could expose to the listeners that if people knew that, if my listeners knew these three things, it would be life-changing for them because it would probably make them make some immediate change to their life?
Wow. Well, that's a very interesting question. I guess the first one would be what we just talked about, which is the whole sordid story behind dairy. that if you drink milk, you might as well eat veal. Okay, that the dairy industry is predicated on veal and cruelty, and it's the most unethical industry in the food chain. Okay, so that would be the first thing. Would be if you drink milk, you might as well eat veal. Okay, and most people who have a heart won't eat veal. The second thing would be the whole establishment of mental illness in the United States, which has been achieved by pharma. The idea that they want people to think they're mentally ill to sell drugs. And so the second secret would be, no, you're not mentally ill, but pharma wants you to believe so. Being shy, having a sad day, you're not mentally ill. The kids on the campuses who can't study or didn't get enough sleep do not have depression. So this whole mentally ill movement is funded by pharma, and there's front groups. There's front groups that make sure, when a suicide occurs on a campus, NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness, will swoop, their pharma-funded front group, swoop down and say, this suicide was because of a lack of availability of antidepressants, and it was a stigma and it probably was caused by antidepressants.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking.
But I would say the second thing I tell people is this whole mentally ill movement where everybody's mentally ill and we have to fund them with our tax dollars is driven by pharma.
Great.
And then the last thing would be probably the GERD meds. That no, you don't have GERD. You might have heartburn. We used to take Tums for it, but these GERD medicines, such as the purple pill, are causing leaching of the calcium, and they're causing C. diff, C. difficile in the intestines. They're not innocuous at all. They're causing more harm than good, and big food and big pharma have convinced people that you can overeat and then take these PPIs, proton pump inhibitors, which are really taking a toll on people's health. And I think people don't realize that. They think, well, I ate too much or I have indigestion. They cause a rebound. When you try to stop, you'll get the rebound. And those GERD medicines are really dangerous. People should not take them.
And so many people do.
Well, it's advertising. They've successfully gotten this in people's homes, and it's not innocuous.
And if you go on a plant-based diet, you most likely won't have any GERDs.
Right. No, absolutely. If people eat wrong, and then they take the drugs to chase the bad diet.
Right.
And then they feel worse, and you just see this. And I always say to people, even if you don't care about this bad health that other people are chasing, a lot of it is our healthcare costs and our tax dollars that are treating it, so that you should care, because when somebody has, like a high blood pressure, diabetes, all these things, we pay for it.
Yep. Yeah. I love this. I want to read this little thing from your book. It says, despite the wonder of Western medicine, the United States has some of the sickest people in the world, thanks to direct-to-consumer advertising, and most of it is self-diagnosed. We suffer from seasonal allergies, asthma, seasonal affective disorder, social anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder, erectile dysfunction, irritable bowel syndrome, dry eye, fibromyalgia, insomnia, migraines, mood disorders, obsessive compulsive disorders, spectrum disorders, chronic fatigue, restless leg syndrome, excessive daytime sleepiness, osteopenia, perimenopause, and lactose intolerance. And many of these new diseases are imbalances from a deficiency of a drug that Big Pharma makes, and we will need them for the rest of our lives. That's what the marketing materials say. And in addition to taking drugs for diseases and deficiencies that barely existed before drug ads came into being, we take drugs now to prevent diseases which we don't even have, like thinning bones and cardiovascular diseases. I love that. I think that says it all. It's so true. But you don't realize until you list it all down. When I was reading that list, I was like, Well, those are all the ads that are on TV, every one of those things. It's so true. It's sad that we ever let Big Pharma advertise on TV. That was life-changing in a bad way for the United States.
Well, here's what it stands for your profession, because the Big Pharma obviously wants the ads on. The media stations want the ads on. Doctors like the payola, and patients like to take the drug. So it's hard to cut through all these happy people who want these, someone such as yourself who's saying, no, there's a better way.
Right. That's true. That's true. But I do believe in the truth, Martha. I feel like eventually those patients come to me, like in the beginning, like maybe the first year, maybe if it's even the first couple of years, they'll feel better. But eventually they start feeling lousy and the symptoms take their toll, the side effects. They give them symptoms, right, and those symptoms take a toll. So eventually, there's no one out there feeling wonderful on their drugs. If they are, they're just in a delusion, because these drugs are chemicals, and in the long run, I don't know how many years it is, but there's going to come a day where you're going to not feel good because of them, and you're going to develop the side effects of them. And so if that's when they come to me, then they're ready to get off.
Right, but if they're ready to hear.
They're ready. But if they come to me before that and I try to get them off their antidepressant because I tell them a homeopathic remedy could help them, some of them are willing and some of them are scared, but I don't take them off and then try to find a remedy. We try to get their good remedy first, and then you slowly bring them down. If they notice that they're still feeling okay, then they're more willing to keep going.
Right. And, like you say, they don't feel well, but they're, the TV ads are probably the biggest reason for this. And I always tell people, I really don't watch much TV because the ads will convince you,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
Something we didn't even talk about that is so much a part of this negative cycle is the statins. The statins came out and convinced people you might be at risk for cardiovascular, but with this pill, like Lipitor was the best-selling pill in the world, you can have your bacon cheeseburger and you won't have a heart attack. I mean, come on.
I know.
That is
Oh, I know. Well, we'll do an episode and we'll talk about, certain diseases and certain drugs that are used to treat them and the truth behind them. That would be a good one.
Yes.
That'd be great.
They really, when you think about it, what kind of culture says, go on, eat the bad stuff and take a pill? I mean, that is sort of the whole thing we're up against.
Yeah. Well, so in closing, I want you first to tell people how they can follow your work. Like, do you have a website? I know you do Twitter. Tell them your Twitter name and Facebook, and if you have any other social media things you post to.
Oh, well, thank you. Okay, I usually put my material up on opednews.com. That's kind of my favorite website.
How do you spell that?
OPED News, NEWS.com. And usually I put something up maybe 4 times a week, so
Great.
whenever and so that's where you can really, I use that more than Twitter or Facebook, opednews.com.
Okay, great. And Twitter, what's your Twitter? Are you just your name, Martha Rosenberg, or is it another name?
No, actually, there was somebody who already had my name, so mine is Martha Rosenberg, Marth Rosenberg, without the A.
Okay. So, and do you Facebook?
Yeah, I do Facebook, under my name.
Okay, great.
And
well,
so
cool.
I like to put in some, I like to add cartoons, just so people can kind of get the irony of what we're talking about. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's so, that's a good message because it's a strong visual, and that sometimes can be better than for people reading. So they just need to see the picture of something that can make a lot more sense. So cool. Martha, thank you. That was great. And I'm really excited for people to get to know you and read your articles because honestly, so many people out there don't know what they're reading, what's real and what's not real. And you just have to find reliable sources. And, when they're reading a study about a drug and it's funded by the pharmaceutical company, or if they're reading a study that says, we just read that you can have, 7 eggs a day and it has no effect on your cholesterol. And it's just like, what? When I hear this, I just go, what? How can they legally say this? So, but then you got to look, oh, it's funded by the egg industry. Oh,
Right.
okay. So when my listeners can look and say, oh, that's Martha Rosenberg. Well, she's a great source because I know how much research and digging she does to get to the truth. So I try to get people on the show that are, science-based and do a lot of research before they speak out. So you're going to be one of those on my show. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate and admire the work you're doing, and I would just tell your listeners, keep skepticism in your thoughts when you read these things about 7 eggs are okay, because a lot of the stuff we're reading, it's industry financed.
Yeah, that's so true. And Martha, I have to tell people all the time, now come on, really, just think about that sentence. I mean, really, does it really make sense to you? Does that feel intuitively correct that you could eat 7 eggs and it wouldn't affect your cholesterol? So some part of it, we can't just be like these dummies that just follow a sentence and say, oh, well, I read that, so I'm going to do it. It's 2017. We are waking up, and if we haven't, we need to wake up, because it's our own life and people are dying much earlier. And if you want to have any quality of your life and be around to be involved with your kids or to help save the animals or the planet like I do, I eat well because I want to be here to help people get better and to make our world a better place. So you can't do that without any energy and feeling crappy or having headaches every day or IBS or thyroid disorders. You can't do that work. So just eat better to feel better. And then when you feel better, you'll say, like I said, health is freedom. And when you're free, then you can do whatever you want in life, which is good work.
You're so right. You're so right. And I just admire what you're doing.
Thank you so much. And I so enjoyed it. And we'll be in touch soon, and get ready for our next episode, okay?
Wonderful. Thank you again. And we'll talk soon.
Okay. Thanks, Martha. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Wow. Now, how was that one, guys? I think once people learn just what is really in our meat, that they're going to stop wondering why we're so sick. Really, to think that chickens are being fed quinolone antibiotic water? Oh my God. To think about how many antibiotics are fed to our livestock and factory farmed animal? It's no wonder the medical world is in a tizzy about the superbugs that they're losing patients to, because even our strongest antibiotics are not working on these infections. I can tell you there are many talks about this in the medical world, and it's a huge concern for the future. Resistant infections are rising, and old disease that they thought they got rid of, like TB, tuberculosis, well, they're coming back, and we have a huge battle on our hands. So what can you do about that? Well, first I'm going to say learn homeopathy, and I hope to be teaching you more in the future, so stay tuned for that. But also, avoid antibiotics at all times and try to heal with natural methods like homeopathy, herbs, and anything that nature has given us. Even food, as you know, is our medicine. And gosh, after today, you can see that eating any animal meat, how drug-filled and toxic it really is. So if you eat meat, you have to at least realize what you're putting in your system. No more being in denial, people, because here on the Vidal Speaks podcast, I expose you to the truth. We're getting antibiotics from our water now, from our meat, and our doctors are still prescribing them wrongly because they're giving out prescriptions when people have viral afflictions like shingles or a flu, and they're viruses and not helped by antibiotics. So take charge of what you want to go in your body. Drink pure distilled water and take your ionic minerals and eat an organic plant-based diet filled with healing phytonutrients that help us heal and detox our bodies. Avoid all animal products, all pharmaceuticals as much as possible, and start out by by seeking a homeopath to help you, and then you can go on and work with a plant-based nutritionist to coach you through to a healthy lifestyle. I love so much talking to Martha today and having her inform us of the truth of what is really in our meat and how the pharmaceutical problem overlaps into our food problem here in the U.S. And always remember, if other countries don't want our meat, then why would you want to eat it? Don't be fooled or fools. Anyways, I think I've said enough here today. You guys must know what time it is today, right? Yep, it's time to say goodbye. I hope you enjoyed the show today, my podcast family. Ta-ta for now. Until next week, don't eat meat and eat lots of veggies. Vidal has spoken. Remember, you heal with a plant-powered diet, homeopathy, and detoxing. Of course. Peace. Be healthy. Be free. Live life.